Here we are, breaking down dividing fractions through visual models. Through this program, you're going to go through and you're going to be looking at all the different approaches for dividing with a fraction. If it's a whole number divided by a fraction divided by a whole number, the fraction divided by a fraction, and the mixed number divided by a fraction. You're going to have examples, you're going to have practice, you're going to have the opportunity to ask classmates and myself for help, for understanding, and we're going to help guide you through this in a little bit different practice. The objectives that we're going to be looking at today: review fraction models. We want to go back and just look at the very basic. What do these models look like? What is it to represent a whole number? What is it to represent a fraction? What is it to represent that mixed number? Because if we don't have that, we're not going to be able to draw these visual models for the dividing aspect of it. Once we get through that, we're going to move down here to divide whole numbers by fractions. We're going to look at a few problems there. I'm going to walk you step by step through these problems, and then you're going to have 3 problems to practice. Once you think you have those, you're going to come check in, and if you have it, you're going to move on. If not, we're going to discuss it a little bit and have you try some of those again. Once you get those correct, we're going to move on to divide fractions by whole numbers. This is the one that's probably the trickiest for most people because the idea of what we have here is a little bit different from the other 3. So we're going to go through, and each of these are going to look the same. You're going to have 2 examples that I'm going to walk you through, and then you're going to move into the practice part. Again, 3 practice problems. Once you have those, you're going to come check in, and we're going to discuss what you found and look at your work and see if there's anything that we need to add to it, or if you're ready to move on down to dividing fractions by fractions. Once you go through the examples, you're going to have the practice, and again, come check in. Once we've settled on that piece of it, we're going to move into the divide mixed numbers by fractions. Practice, check in number 4, and once we're at that point, we'll do a little bit of a final run through, and then we're going to take a quiz on this. We're going to look at making sure that you are fully prepared with all of these different practices, and then we'll go into our quiz. Again, the very basic of the visual aspect of dividing fractions is making sure that we know how to represent fractions visually, or whole numbers, or mixed numbers. What do these 3 pieces look like on a visual model? Now, there's different models. You could have the bars, you could have circles. There's different types that we might look at. For our purpose today, we're going to be looking mostly with bars. For this aspect of dividing, the bars are a little bit easier approach than the others. Whole numbers. It's as simple as we have 1 whole. I draw 1 full rectangle. This entire rectangle represents my 1 whole. 2. If I have my 2 wholes, I have 1 whole, 2 wholes. So now I shade in the entire aspect, the entire piece here represents the wholes. With a fraction, this is where it might look a little bit different. We'll start off easy, 1/2. So now I know that that was my 1 whole right there, but I have a half of that. So all I'm going to do is divide that in half, and I can shade. Each side of that represents a half. So if I have a half, I want to shade in 1/2 of that. 5/6. If I have one like this, again, this denominator right here tells me how many pieces I'm going to break my part into. And for the sake of trying to make them even, I know that I can have a half, and each half is going to be broken into threes. Now, the numerator tells me how many of these pieces I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can shade in to represent that 5/6. And the last thing that we have are mixed numbers. So we have our whole and a fractional piece. Now, there's my one whole. So this is what I have to represent my one whole right here. But now I need to represent my fractional piece. So I'm going to draw out a full another piece here. And I'm going to draw this into fourths because now I know I have 1, 2, 3 of those fourths. I could have things up to 5 and we'll do 7/8. So I'm going to draw these out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my 5 whole, but I still need to draw this 6th one out. And I'm going to break this into 8s because that is what my denominator tells me to do right there. So I know 8. I have 4 right now, so I could just cut each of these fourths in half, and now I have 8. So I can color this in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Make sure as we go through that we understand how to draw each of these pieces. If you need to, pause, go back, and look at these again. Try a few on your own. If we look back at our objectives for what we're going to be doing today, we've done our first one right there. We reviewed fraction models. So now hopefully we're ready to be moving into the dividing whole numbers by fractions. If you need, again, go back, look at them, practice a few more on your own. Come talk to me if you need to. The first problem we're going to look at is going to be 2 divided by 3/5. Now, what we have to think about is what's even going on in this problem. I have 2 wholes, so I'm going to draw that out. 1, 2. I have these 2 full pieces, 2 whole units that I want to break into this idea of 3/5. I want to know how many groups of 3 can be made using 1/5 size pieces. How many groups of 3 can be made using 1/5 size pieces? This is the big idea here, that we're trying to find these groups. We're going to break our wholes into this denominator size piece. And we want to be able to make them in groups of the numerator. So as we go through here, we're going to break this into fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I want to think groups of 3. I have them in my fifths, so it doesn't matter the size anymore. Now I just want to know how many groups of 3 can be made. Well, there's 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 pieces. That's one group. 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 pieces. That's my second group. 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 pieces. That's my third group. And now I have this last piece over here, remaining, this guy right here, I have to think, what makes up a whole group? Well, in this case, it's the 3. 3 squares, 3 of these sections make up one whole group. So if I have 1 left over, that means I have 1/3 of another full group. So in this case, my answer is 3 and 1/3. Looking for those groups of 3 in this case. The next one we're going to look at is 3 divided by 6/7. First step again, draw my dividend. 1, 2, 3. So now I have my dividend. That 3 is represented. Next thing I want to do is, because there are whole numbers and there's nothing to worry about, that each one of these is a equal whole value. So now I'm going to split those whole values into 7s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Once I have those, I'm going to start making my groups of 6. This is the question that we're asking. How many groups of 6 that are 1/7 size pieces will fit into 3 whole units? So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start counting. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have my first whole group right there. I'm going to keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have my next full group of 6 pieces here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have a third full set. And again, you can see how I'm kind of boxing these off. That's something that visually might be helpful as you're going through this. Now I look at it and I have 1, 2, 3 extra pieces here. So I don't have another full set. So I have 3 full sets and I have 3 out of 6 that make up a whole. I look at that and I can see that 3 and 6 can simplify, so I have 3 and 1/2 units. So 6/7 will go into 3 3.5 times. Here are the 3 problems that I want you to try. Go through, take your time, think about what is happening in each of these problems. Go back to the previous slides, rewatch the clips there. See what you need to do to help you out. We're going to have some of your classmates that have demonstrated that they have a solid understanding of this come around and help you out. They're going to be my co-teachers today. So they're going to be wandering around. If you have questions, ask them as well. Sometimes it's nice to hear it in a language of one of your peers. When you're done, bring it over. We'll check it in. We'll do a little conference, and then we'll go on from there. So at this point, we just divided whole numbers by fractions and the practice and check-in 1. You've shown that you're comfortable, confident with the whole numbers by fractions. Let's move into dividing fractions by whole numbers. The dividing fractions by whole numbers seems to be one of the ones that typically is the harder one to understand because we're looking at a little bit different of a mindset here. So if we think about what we have, 3/4. If I go to shade this out, I have 1, 2, 3/4. Now the problem with this is we have to think about what we're doing. So I have these 3/4 right here. I want to break this into groups of 4. 4 equal groups. So as I'm trying to do that, I could kind of see, okay, well, maybe that's half, so that would be about half of that. That might be about half of that. I don't really know what I have going here. I don't know how much this value is. Is this value the same size? Well, when I look at that, it doesn't look like it. It looks like that second one's a little bit bigger. So we need to come up with a better approach in figuring out how to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of what we had here because that just didn't make enough sense to be able to come up with a good solid answer. So we're going to redraw our 3/4. I'm going to draw this one a little bit bigger. There's a half of that. So now I have my fourths. I'm going to shade in what we have. 1, 2, 3. So again, I have 4 sections because that's what my denominator tells me. And I shaded in 3 of them because that's what my numerators tell me. Part over whole. So my whole is 4/4, and my part that I have is the 3. So now I have to think, well, I couldn't easily break that up into 4 equal sections this way. I'm dividing it by this 4, and that's why I was looking at the 4 equal sections, because I need to be able to break this into 4 pieces, and they need to be all of equal size. So to do this, what we want to think about is that idea of common denominators. So I want to figure out, how do I break these 3/4 into a value that I could divide into 4 equal sections? The easiest approach here is if I take each of these thirds and I break it into fourths. Now I've taken that number and I've guaranteed that whatever value I have here is going to be divisible by 4. So the whole purpose of dividing each of these fourths by 4 is that idea that I'm making sure I'm finding a value that's going to be divisible by 4. And now I can look, how many of these size pieces do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I have 12 pieces that I want to be able to break into 4 equal groups. So I'm going to divide that by 4 because, again, that's what my problem's wanting. And I know now that I can divide this number by 4 because I made them into a value that is divisible by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So now when I look at it, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal groups. Each of those groups consists of 3 of these pieces. But what size are these pieces? It's not 3/12 because that's not including this piece over here. So I have to think about, my answer has to represent the value of each of these pieces in relation to the whole. The value has to represent these pieces in relation to the whole. So all I'm going to do is divide this one up the same way we did the other. I knew I had 12 here. This is 4 more pieces. So the 12 and 4 makes 16. So 3/4 divided by 4 is going to be my 3/16. The next one we look at 5/7 divided by 2. I already drew out my one full unit because I know 5/7 is going to be part of 1. So I'm going to split this apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have my 7 parts. I'm going to highlight what I have of those 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now, what I have represented is my dividend. So I represented that 5/7. Now what I need to do is I can look. Do I have enough for groups of 2? 1, 2, it's not going to break up very easily because I'm not going to say that I have 2.5 sevens. Because if I look at this, let me change colors. That's what I have. That's what I'm trying to divide by 2. And that would be right here. So it wouldn't make sense for me to say I have 2.5 sevens. I want to know a more exact value here. So we're going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of this divide right here. Now, so again, I want to think about, well, what could I do that would make these numbers divisible by 2? I could take each of my pieces and divide them in half. What I just did was guarantee, because I doubled the number of pieces, I'm going to be able to divide that number by 2. So I can count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 pieces. I want to divide these 10 pieces by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And I could look at where that line was right here. I still see that 2.5 is represented by these 5 pieces. So each of the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that makes up one group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That 5 makes up the second group. So I do know I have 2 equal sections. And that is what my question wanted. But now I need to make sure I represent, well, what is this 5? What's 5 what? So I need to make sure I look at the whole amount. So I do the same thing here. I'm going to split each of these remaining 7s in half. I had 10. Now I have 11, 12, 13, 14. So my answer is 5/14. Here are your practice problems for this section. Pause, work on these problems. If you need help, ask one of the peer co-teachers. Come ask me. Make sure that we're taking our time, we're getting this understood. So you've checked in. We can mark dividing fractions by whole numbers off our list, and we can get ready to move into fractions by fractions. With dividing fractions by fractions, because we're talking about units that aren't whole units, for both our dividend and divisor, I like to draw both models out here. So here's my 1/4. I'm going to draw this out and I'm going to shade it in so I know that that is my 1/4. Underneath it, I'm going to draw out my 1/8. Well, if I look at this, I can go through and I can draw, there's my 8 sections. I'm going to shade in my 1/8. The reason why I like to do this is I can kind of look to see, is there a connection between these two? Well, right here, I can kind of see that these fourths match up. But I know this 1/8 isn't the same size as a fourth. But if I go and find that common denominator, I'm just going to draw some solid lines here so it shows up a little bit easier. If I draw this common denominator between these, I can see the connection that I have. Now that I'm dealing with the same size pieces, I can look. I know that each of these green, this one here, and this one here, are equal to my 1/8 down here. So all I have to do is count. I have one here and a second one there. So 1/4 divided by 1/8. I have 2/8 will go into this 1/4. And that is my final answer. The next problem we'll look at is 1/3 divided by 5/6. So again, you can see I drew out my two whole unit fraction bars, one to represent the 1/3, one to represent the 5/6. For me, this just is the easier approach visually, so I can see the connection between the values a little bit easier. I can find those common denominators. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to turn this one into 1/3. I'll shade in what I have. The second one I'm going to make into 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to shade in what I have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Visually, another reason why I like to draw both out is if we think about that last one, this top divisor had more shaded in than the dividend did. That meant that my answer was going to be more than 1 because I had a greater amount being divided than what was dividing it. There was a smaller piece. Here, it's not that way. My dividend is smaller than the divisor. So I know I'm going to have less than one whole unit here because that is represented right now. I have more blue than green, so I know I can't get a full set of this 5/6 in this picture. Again, I can look and I can see this nice little connection here. That those pieces are equal. And I can see that for every 1/3, I have 2/6. So if I look here, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. So now I can see that my size pieces are the same. And I can look, well, what do I have? If 5/6 is my whole, how many thirds do I get towards that 5/6? Well, I have 1, 2. So now I know that I have 2 pieces of what makes up my whole amount is 5. So I end up with 2/5 of a whole unit. And I can even see right here that if I would shade in 3 more, 1, 2, 3, that would be that one whole amount there. And that's what I would need to add to my 2 is that 3 to make one whole. At this point, pause the video, look at your practice problems, think about what you're going to have, draw out your images, ask myself or some of your peer co-teachers for a little bit of help if you need it. When you're ready, let's talk about what you have and move on. Alright, so now you've checked in, you've moved on, and we're down to our last topic, dividing mixed numbers by fractions. You're almost there, you're doing great, keep going. When we're dividing a mixed number, we're kind of combining everything that we've done so far because we have this idea that there's a full unit, but we also have this partial unit. So I need to be able to represent this entire value, the entire mixed number. When I do this, I want to look, well, I know I have one full, so I know I have all of this one right here. But this next piece, I have 3/8 of it. So I'm going to break it down into eighths, just like we did if we were dealing with a fraction. And I'm going to shade in what I have here. 1, 2, 3. Now, I'm also dividing by a fraction, and when I did that, it is nice to be able to see what does that look like? How does it relate to what I have up above? And maybe what I'll do is, instead of just randomly drawing this, the whole number is easy. We looked at that before, and I could say, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I could break that down into my fourths there. But I also have this other idea that I have these eighths. So I'm going to come over here, and I want to see what do I have that can match up. And if I look at this, I'm going to shade that in to represent my 3/4. I want to find that common denominator. We talked about this earlier, and that's going to be the key in finding a lot of these, is that idea of the common denominator. If I look at the relationship that happens here, I can see this idea that each of my fourths here lines up nicely with the even number eighths. The common denominator between an 8 and a 4 is 8. So I could look and I can break this piece apart into eighths and see what do I have here. Well, 3/4 is going to be equivalent to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eighths. So now in my head I can think, well, how many groups of 6, if they're in eighth size pieces, can I get out of here? So the easy thing now, because I already had this in fourths, all I have to do is turn this into eighths, and I can look. Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's one group of 6. And then I look at what I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll show my group of 6 right there. So I see I have one full group, and I have 5 towards the next group of 6. So I end up with 1 and 5/6. So I've gone ahead and drawn out partial of the model for this problem. I have 3 2/3 divided by 5/6. So to represent my 3 2/3, I have 1, 2, 3 holes, and I can divide this last one into thirds, and I'm going to have 2 of these. So I have my 3 2/3 represented there, and I'm dividing that by 6. Well, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to divide this into 6 pieces. And I know that I have 5 of these pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 6. The key here, the holes, I can break these down into anything that I need to very easily. So I want to focus my attention right here. Focus it on that fractional piece, because this is going to be what helps guide our final answer. So I look at this and I can see, and even look up here. Use this to help you out. Use the number sense. I can see, well, 3 and 6, that's got a common denominator of 6. So I can go through and I know that if I look at this, that's going to line up, that's going to line up. So I need to make each of these pieces into 6. That also means that I can do that here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once I get them all into 6, now that piece doesn't matter. All I'm looking for is how many groups of 5 can I make? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's one group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my second group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have a third group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my fourth group, and then I can look and see, well, what do I have left? I have those 2 pieces, 1, 2. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4 full groups of 5, and I had 2 pieces left towards the next 5. Here are the practice problems for this section. Again, ask help, ask for questions, try it though. Don't just give up before you've given it a shot. Come up with something, show something so that we can have that discussion about where to go from there. Well, you've made it all the way through. We can mark off our mixed numbers by fractions, and now you're ready for the quiz. You've shown that you can do all of these steps by now. You've had to prove it to be able to move through this process. So now, let's take this quiz. Don't worry, you got this.